My name is Ava Hartley. I am 34 years old, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and until very recently, I thought I understood what it meant to be married, to be loved, to be chosen. On paper, my life looked perfect. A beautiful home in the suburbs, expensive clothes hanging neatly in my walk-in closet, vacations that sparkled on Instagram, and a husband who turned heads when we walked into a room together. His name is Daniel Hartley, successful attorney, charming in public, and devastatingly good at smiling like he cared. But here's the truth nobody saw. Behind the gloss, behind the practiced smiles and perfectly framed photos, there was a quiet cruelty I kept swallowing day after day. Daniel was the kind of man who believed every disagreement had to end with him on top. Not because he wanted peace, but because he needed dominance. If I questioned him, even gently, it was framed as disrespect. If I voiced my opinion too strongly, he'd call me ungrateful, emotional, or out of touch. At first, I told myself it was just stress from his job, the long hours, the cases that weighed on him. But years in, I realized stress wasn't an excuse, it was a mask. Underneath it, he simply enjoyed control. And still I stayed. Because when you've built your life around someone else's approval, leaving feels like cutting off your own oxygen. The night everything broke open wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It started like a regular Friday date night, dinner reservations at one of Richmond's most exclusive restaurants. I'd picked a dress Daniel once said he liked. Black silk, modest neckline, the kind of outfit that didn't draw too much attention but still whispered sophistication. My hair was pinned back neatly. I wore the shoes he preferred, even though they pinched my toes. We were seated quickly, and at first the conversation was civil. He talked about work, his partners at the firm, the idiots he had to correct every day. I nodded in all the right places, smiled when I was supposed to. Then, somewhere between the appetizers and the wine, something shifted. It started small. I made a joke about him always checking his phone at dinner, a light jab meant to break the tension. Instead of laughing, he stiffened. His eyes, sharp and calculating, cut into me across the table. "You always have something to say, don't you?" he muttered, not quite loud enough for the next table to hear, but enough for me to shrink back in my seat. "It was just a joke, Daniel," I said quietly, hoping to smooth it over. "Respect," he said flatly, as if the word itself was a command. "That's what you seem to forget." The rest of dinner was silent. Every bite felt heavy in my throat. I could feel his anger simmering, and I braced myself for the ride home. But when we stepped outside, the sky had already opened up. Rain poured hard and cold, soaking the pavement, drumming against the awning above the restaurant doors. I instinctively pulled my coat tighter, waiting for Daniel to hand me the car keys, or at least shield me under his umbrella. Instead, he looked at me with a kind of smug detachment. "Maybe this will teach you a lesson," he said, voice calm, almost casual. He pocketed the keys, walked briskly to the car, and slid into the driver's seat. I stood there, stunned, watching as his taillights glowed red and then disappeared into the sheets of rain. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My hair clung to my face, mascara running down in black streams. The dress that once felt elegant now clung heavy and cold to my skin. Around me, strangers hurried past, glancing but never stopping. To them, I was just another unfortunate woman waiting for a ride. They didn't know the ache in my chest, the humiliation burning my throat. I don't know how long I stood there before I heard the sound of another engine pulling up. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb, and the window lowered. "Mrs. Hartley," a deep, steady voice said. Relief washed over me when I saw his face. Elias Cross, my bodyguard. Technically, his official title was security consultant, hired years ago after my father passed away and insisted I keep someone nearby for protection. Elias wasn't the kind of man you noticed right away. Tall, broad-shouldered, always in dark suits, his presence quiet but commanding. He'd been with me for years, a constant shadow in the background. Professional, discreet, unshakable. At that moment, though, he didn't look like a shadow. He looked like a lifeline. He stepped out, rain drenching his jacket in seconds, and without hesitation, He shrugged it off and draped it over my shoulders. The warmth of the fabric, the steadiness in his gaze, it was enough to break me. My knees trembled, and for a second, I thought I might collapse. "I've got you," he said simply, his hand firm but gentle on my arm. Those 3 words unraveled something inside me. For years, I'd been told I was too much, too emotional, too difficult. And here was someone telling me, without judgment or hesitation, that I wasn't too much at all. I was someone worth catching. He opened the SUV door, guided me inside, and turned the heat up. As the car pulled away from the curb, I watched the rain streak across the windows, every drop feeling like a punctuation mark in a sentence I hadn't wanted to write. Because here's the thing, I knew, deep down, this wasn't just about one cruel night in the rain. It was about all the small moments that led up to it. The dismissive comments, the cold silences, the way Daniel chipped away at me until I barely recognized myself. This was just the moment I finally saw it for what it was. And the craziest part? As I sat there, shivering under Elias's coat, I realized Daniel had no idea he'd just set something in motion that he wouldn't be able to control. Because you can only push someone so far before they stop breaking and start rebuilding. That night, as the rain pounded the roof of the SUV, something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but the girl who'd been quietly swallowing pain for years had just taken her last bite. If this story resonates with you, or you're hooked already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapter. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. My name still felt strange in my own mouth when I whispered it to myself later that night. Ava Hartley. I kept saying it quietly as though repetition would anchor me, as though clinging to a label might stop the ground from shifting beneath my feet. But all it did was remind me of the man who shared that name with me, the man who had left me standing in the rain like an abandoned pet. I sat curled up on the edge of my bed, Elias's jacket draped around my shoulders long after he had driven me home. I hadn't been able to bring myself to give it back yet. It smelled faintly of him, clean, faint cologne, something woodsy and sharp, and for some reason, that small comfort felt safer than anything in my own house. The master bedroom was enormous, decorated exactly how Daniel had wanted, sleek, sterile, everything in shades of white, gray, and black. Nothing about it felt like me. The only touch of myself I had left in the space was a framed photograph of my parents on the nightstand. My mother smiling, my father's arm looped protectively around her waist. They had loved each other fiercely, imperfectly, but honestly. I had grown up believing I'd have that one day too. And now here I was, 34 years old, living in a home that looked like a magazine spread, but felt colder than the rain Daniel had left me in. I didn't cry right away. For years I'd trained myself not to, at least not where he could see. Daniel didn't comfort tears. He weaponized them. He'd roll his eyes, say I was being dramatic, call me manipulative. I had learned to swallow grief like bitter medicine, to sit in silence until the ache dulled enough to be hidden. But that night, something cracked open. The tears came hot and unstoppable. I pressed my palms over my eyes, shaking silently, not wanting to wake him. He wasn't home yet. Of course he wasn't. He had driven away and left me stranded, and still he hadn't returned. I didn't need to ask myself why. Deep down, I already knew the truth I'd been too afraid to say aloud. There was someone else. The signs had been there, like scattered breadcrumbs I pretended not to see. The late nights at the office. The quick silencing of his phone when I walked into the room. The way he had started wearing cologne again, different from the one I bought him last Christmas. The faint lipstick smudge, I told myself, was a trick of the light. Every small piece I shoved into a locked drawer in my mind, because if I opened it, everything would spill out and drown me. But standing in the rain that night, watching him drive away, I realized he hadn't just left me because he was angry. He had left me because he didn't care anymore. The front door opened downstairs. My chest tightened. I wiped at my face quickly, trying to erase the evidence of my tears. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor, then up the staircase. He didn't move quietly. Daniel never did. He liked to be heard, to make an entrance, even in his own home. He walked in without knocking, loosening his tie as if nothing had happened. His hair was damp, not from the rain but from a shower. He smelled faintly of soap I didn't recognize. "You're still up," he said flatly, not even glancing at me as he tossed his tie on the chair. My throat tightened. "You left me out there." He sighed like I was a child whining about spilled milk. "Don't start. Daniel, you left me in the rain. You just drove away." His eyes flicked toward me then, sharp and annoyed. "You embarrass me in public. What did you expect? Actions have consequences, Ava. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to undermine me at dinner." I stared at him, stunned. "I made a joke about you being on your phone. That's what you're calling undermining?" "It's about respect," he snapped, stepping closer. "You think people don't notice when my wife makes little digs at me? Do you have any idea how that reflects on me?" I almost laughed, almost. The absurdity of it, the way his ego twisted even the smallest thing into an attack. But the laugh stuck in my throat because I knew what would follow. "You humiliated me," he continued, his voice rising. "So, I left you there to think about it. That's how you learn." The words sliced through me. That's how you learn. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. I was no longer a partner to him, no longer a woman with her own thoughts and dignity. I was a student he needed to discipline. Something inside me broke then. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a hairline crack in glass spreading under pressure. My tears dried on my face, replaced by a coldness I hadn't felt before. He must have noticed the shift in my eyes because his expression softened slightly. He reached for me, as if offering an olive branch. "Don't look at me like that. I only do this because I love you, because I want what's best for us." I pulled back before his hand could touch me. For the first time in years, I didn't shrink into his touch. I didn't pretend. "You don't love me," I whispered. "You love control." The silence that followed was louder than his shouting had ever been. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flared, but he didn't deny it. That, more than anything, confirmed what I already knew. He turned away, muttering under his breath, and disappeared into the bathroom. I sat there frozen, listening to the water run as he started another shower. My mind spun, replaying his words, my words, the rain, the look in Elias's eyes when he wrapped his coat around me. Elias. I shouldn't have been thinking about him. Not like that. But the memory wouldn't leave me. The steadiness in his voice, the way he didn't hesitate to come to my side when Daniel abandoned me. He hadn't said much, but what he said had mattered more than all of Daniel's empty declarations of love. I lay awake long after Daniel crawled into bed and fell asleep beside me, snoring softly, oblivious. My body stiffened every time his arm brushed mine. I wanted to get up, to go downstairs, to call someone, anyone, but the truth was I had no one left. Over the years, I had let friendships fade, let family distance themselves, all because it was easier than dealing with Daniel's disapproval. He didn't like my best friend, so I stopped calling her. He said my brother interfered too much, so I pulled away. One by one, I cut ties until the only person I had left in my daily life was him. And now, maybe, Elias. The next morning, I tried to play the part again. I made coffee, cooked breakfast, smiled faintly when Daniel made a comment about a big case he was working on. He kissed my cheek on his way out the door, as though nothing had happened. As though he hadn't left me in the rain like I was nothing. When the door clicked shut, I sat at the table staring at the untouched plate of eggs until my stomach turned. My hands trembled. "Mrs. Hartley?" I looked up to find Elias standing at the doorway. He never intruded, never crossed boundaries, but his presence was steady, watchful. "You all right?" he asked quietly. I opened my mouth to say yes, the automatic response I always gave. But the word wouldn't come. Instead, my lips trembled, and I pressed a hand to my mouth to stop the sob building in my chest. Elias stepped forward. Not too close, not enough to frighten me, but his eyes softened. "You don't have to pretend with me." That undid me completely. The tears came again, hot and fast. I shook my head, whispering, "I don't know who I am anymore." His voice was calm, grounding. "You're still you. You just need to find her again." The simplicity of that nearly broke me all over again. Because deep down I knew he was right. Somewhere inside this shell of a woman Daniel had molded, Ava still existed. The Ava who used to laugh too loud, who used to dream, who used to believe in love. She wasn't gone. Just buried. And for the first time, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could dig her out. That was the morning I decided I wasn't going to let Daniel keep writing my story. The next few days blurred together, like gray paint smeared across a canvas until nothing distinct remained. I went through the motions, waking up, showering, pretending to eat breakfast, dressing myself carefully before Daniel came downstairs so he'd have nothing to criticize. I made sure the house looked perfect, that his clothes were pressed, that I didn't say the wrong thing at the wrong time. It wasn't love anymore. It was survival. But something in me had shifted since that night in the rain. I couldn't go back to blind obedience, not completely. I couldn't unhear the contempt in his voice when he told me humiliation was a lesson. And I couldn't unfeel the steadiness of Elias's coat around my shoulders. The strange thing was, Daniel acted as though nothing had happened. He was charming, even attentive in his own clipped way. He talked about a trial he was preparing for, complained about colleagues, complimented me on the dinner I made Wednesday night like he hadn't left me soaking on a street corner days before. His ability to erase his own cruelty was staggering. But the more he ignored it, the more my mind spun with questions. Where had he gone that night? Why had his hair been damp from a shower that wasn't ours? Why was there a trace of perfume on his jacket that didn't belong to me? I had my answer already. I just didn't want to face it. On Friday, he kissed my cheek before leaving for the office, murmuring something about a late deposition. He didn't notice that my hands tightened on the coffee mug, didn't notice the way my eyes followed him out the door. When the sound of his car faded, I sat frozen at the table. My chest burned. I whispered the words aloud, as if speaking them could make me braver. He's cheating. The silence that followed was unbearable. I felt like I was suffocating. Finally, I pushed my chair back and walked into the hallway where Elias stood, his posture straight, eyes alert as always. "Elias," I said, my voice shaking, "can I ask you something?" His expression softened just enough to remind me he wasn't just a wall of muscle and discipline. He nodded. "Have you ever noticed anything about Daniel? Anything unusual?" He didn't answer right away. That was Elias's way. He didn't speak unless he meant it. Finally, he said carefully, "What do you mean by unusual?" My throat tightened. Like somewhere else he goes. Someone else he sees. His jaw flexed. "Do you want the truth?" I met his eyes. Yes. For a moment, he hesitated, as though weighing whether he should say it. Then he gave a slight nod. "I've had suspicions. I haven't acted on them because it wasn't my place. But if you want me to find out, I can." The air left my lungs in a rush. I should have been terrified of the confirmation, but instead, I felt something sharp spark inside me. A need for the truth, no matter how much it cut. "Do it," I whispered. That night, when Daniel claimed he'd be working late again, Elias waited a discreet amount of time before taking the SUV out. I sat at home in silence, my fingers clenched around my phone, the seconds dragging into hours. My mind was a battlefield, one side praying I was wrong, the other preparing for war. When the text finally came, my hands trembled so badly, I almost dropped the phone. "He's at the riverfront condos. Apartment 5B. No explanation. No apology. Just the truth, delivered clean and sharp like a blade." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. My body went numb, then hot, then numb again. I could picture it all too easily. Daniel, his jacket on the back of a chair, his tie loosened, his lips pressed against someone else's skin, whispering words he hadn't said to me in years. My stomach twisted so violently I ran to the bathroom and vomited. When I stumbled back to bed, the house felt too big, too empty, too suffocating. I curled into myself, shaking, waiting for him to return. He came in close to midnight, whistling softly under his breath, smelling faintly of that same unfamiliar perfume. He slid into bed without a word. When his arm draped over me, I lay rigid, my eyes wide open in the dark. He didn't notice. He was already drifting off, content in his lies. The next morning, I couldn't look at him. My chest felt like it was full of shards of glass. He smiled at me over his coffee like everything was fine, like he hadn't just betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the mug at his head, to watch the ceramic shatter into 100 pieces. But instead, I sat in silence. That's what years with him had trained me to do. Silence. Obedience. Swallowing the hurt. But inside, the storm was building. Later that day, I asked Elias to drive me out of town, somewhere quiet, somewhere far from Daniel's shadow. We ended up at a small park by the James River. The water rushed past, brown and wild after the rain, the sound filling the air. I sat on a bench, hugging myself, while Elias stood a respectful distance away. "Tell me everything," I said finally. My voice cracked. "Don't hold back." He didn't sugarcoat it. Elias never did. He's been going there for months. Same condo. Same woman. Blonde. Younger than you. Works at his firm, from what I gathered. He's careful, but not careful enough. The words landed like stones in my chest. Months. Not weeks, not days, months. All while I'd been cooking his dinners, pressing his shirts, smiling at his colleagues like the perfect wife. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to breathe. "You should have told me sooner." His eyes met mine, steady. "It wasn't my place to intervene until you asked. But I've wanted to. Believe me." Something in his tone made my heart stumble. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that went beyond duty. A quiet protectiveness, a simmering anger on my behalf. It was more than professional. "Why?" I whispered. "Because you don't deserve this," he said simply. The honesty in his voice undid me. My throat closed, and tears slid down my cheeks unchecked. I turned away, ashamed of my weakness, but Elias didn't look away. He let me cry, let me fall apart without judgment. When the sobs finally slowed, I wiped my face with trembling hands. I don't even know who I am anymore. He's taken everything from me. My confidence, my friends, my voice. And now this. "You're still you," Elias said quietly. "He hasn't taken that. You just need to remember." I shook my head. I don't even know where to start. His jaw tightened, his gaze fierce. "Start with this. Stop blaming yourself. He made the choice, not you." The words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd twisted myself into knots trying to be enough for Daniel. Pretty enough, quiet enough, supportive enough. Every failure I saw in our marriage, I pinned on myself. But hearing Elias say it so firmly, it cracked something open in me. I wasn't the problem. Daniel was. That realization didn't heal me, not yet. But it planted a seed. That night, when Daniel came home late again, I was waiting for him. I watched him carefully as he loosened his tie, poured himself a drink, scrolled through his phone. I studied the curve of his mouth, the faint smile he tried to hide. I wondered if he was texting her, if the same hands that held me at night were sending her the words I craved to hear. The rage in my chest burned hotter than ever. But I swallowed it down because I wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, I smiled faintly when he asked about dinner. I laughed softly when he made a joke about his colleagues. I let him believe I was still his obedient wife. But inside, I was already planning. Because now I knew the truth. And once you know the truth, you can't go back. The woman Daniel thought he had broken was still here. And she was done waiting in the rain. The hardest part about knowing the truth was pretending I didn't. Every morning I'd watch him knot his tie in the mirror, comb his hair, spritz cologne that wasn't mine, and smile faintly at his own reflection like the world still belonged to him. And every morning I'd bite my tongue until I could taste blood, because I knew if I spoke too soon, all of this would end before I was ready. But I couldn't hold it forever. The rage was too loud, the humiliation too raw. It pressed against my ribs like a fist, begging to be released. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening. We'd been invited to dinner at one of his partner's homes, a sprawling estate on the edge of town. I dressed carefully, painting myself into the role of the perfect wife one last time. Black dress, pearls, the smile I'd practiced in mirrors. He liked when I looked polished but not flashy. That's who he wanted on his arm, an accessory, not a person. The dinner itself was tedious. His colleagues droned on about court cases and politics. The wives compared jewelry and vacations, laughing politely at one another's jokes. Daniel basked in it all, his hand resting on my knee like a brand, reminding me to stay still, stay quiet, stay his. Halfway through dessert, his phone buzzed on the table. I watched his eyes flick to the screen. A text lit up. He angled it quickly away, but not before I saw the name. Samantha. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. He didn't even bother disguising it anymore. My throat tightened. I forced myself to finish the meal, to nod at the right times, to smile politely at the hostess. But inside, something snapped. When we got home, the house was quiet, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. Daniel loosened his tie, poured himself a glass of scotch, and collapsed onto the couch like a king returning to his throne. I stood in the doorway, watching him. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. "Who's Samantha?" I asked. He didn't look up. "What?" "I saw her name on your phone. Samantha. Who is she?" His jaw flexed, but his eyes stayed on the glass in his hand. "She's my paralegal." "Why?" "Don't lie to me." My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "You've been seeing her. Elias followed you. He told me everything." That got his attention. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "You had me followed? Don't twist this on me," I snapped, stepping forward. My voice shook, but it grew stronger with every word. "You've been sneaking around for months. While I've been here, making your dinners, washing your clothes, pretending not to notice the smell of her perfume on you." He laughed then, a sharp, cruel sound that sliced through me. "Perfume? Jesus, Ava. Do you hear yourself? You sound pathetic." My chest heaved. "Don't you dare call me pathetic. What else should I call you?" He stood, towering over me, his voice rising. "You had me followed like some paranoid housewife, and now you're whining because you finally saw what everyone else already knows." The room tilted. "What do you mean, everyone else?" His lips curled into a smirk. "Do you really think people don't notice, Ava? Do you think my colleagues, my friends, don't see how empty this marriage is? You're boring. Predictable. You've let yourself go. And you wonder why I might look elsewhere?" The words hit harder than any slap. My knees buckled, but I forced myself to stand tall. "You left me in the rain," I whispered. He rolled his eyes. "Oh, for God's sake. You're still crying about that? You abandoned me. You humiliated me. And now you stand here and tell me I deserved it." His expression hardened. "Yes. Because you don't respect me. And respect is the foundation of marriage." "No," my voice cracked, then steadied. "Respect is mutual. Love is mutual. This is control. This is cruelty." His face darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath. "Careful, Ava," he murmured. "You're forgetting your place." Something inside me shattered. Not the fragile kind of breaking I'd felt before, but something different, something fierce, something final. I stared into his eyes and realized I wasn't afraid anymore. "I don't have a place with you anymore," I said quietly. "Not as your wife. Not as your doormat. Not as anything." His eyes widened, just slightly, at the defiance in my voice. He hadn't expected it. He thought I'd crumble like always, retreat into silence. But not this time. "You ungrateful bitch," he spat. I didn't flinch. I just turned and walked upstairs, my hands trembling but my spine straight. He shouted after me, his voice echoing through the house, but I didn't stop. I closed the bedroom door, locked it, and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I slid to the floor, shaking, but I wasn't crying this time. Not a single tear. My chest burned with rage, yes, but also with something new, resolve. Later that night, I heard him storm out, the slam of the front door rattling the walls. His car roared down the driveway. I didn't ask where he was going. I already knew. Hours passed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every sneer, every humiliation he had ever dealt me. And instead of breaking me, they began to build something else, a fire. When dawn crept through the curtains, I rose from the bed and walked to the dresser. I pulled open the top drawer and found what I hadn't touched in years, my journal. The one I used to write in before Daniel mocked me for wasting time. I opened it to a blank page. My hand shook as I pressed the pen to the paper, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I wrote down everything. The rain. The affair. His words. My rage. Every bruise he'd left on my spirit. Every scar he'd carved into my confidence. By the time I looked up, the sun was high in the sky, and my hand ached from writing. But I felt lighter, stronger. When I walked downstairs, Elias was waiting by the door. His eyes scanned my face, reading the exhaustion, the anger. You confronted him, he said quietly. I nodded. My voice came out hoarse. He admitted it. He called me pathetic. Said, everyone knows. Elias's jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might march upstairs and drag Daniel out by the throat. But he held himself steady. What do you want to do? He asked. The question startled me. No one had ever asked me that. Not Daniel, not my parents when they were alive, not anyone. What did I want? I swallowed hard. I want my life back. Elias nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for those words. Then that's what we'll get, he said. For the first time in years, I believed it. The house felt colder after that night, like the walls themselves had soaked up Daniel's contempt and were now spitting it back at me. Every corner carried echoes of his sneer, his words, pathetic, boring, predictable, burned into the air like smoke that refused to clear. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching surfaces that once felt like mine, but now only reminded me how much I had given up to keep him satisfied. But something had changed in me. The way I looked at Daniel shifted. Before, I saw him as a storm I had to survive, bracing myself for his moods, his cruelty, his lessons. Now I saw him for what he was, a weak man hiding behind power he didn't earn. Every insult, every betrayal, wasn't proof of my failures. It was proof of his fear. Elias noticed it too. The next morning, when he pulled up outside in his SUV, he studied me with cautious eyes. You're different, he said. I gave him a small, almost dangerous smile. I finally said it to his face. That I'm done. His shoulders eased, but his jaw stayed tense. Then this is where it gets dangerous. Men like him, when they feel control slipping, they lash out harder. I knew he was right. Daniel would never let go easily. He wasn't built to lose. And if I wasn't careful, his anger could swallow me whole before I even had the chance to breathe free air. Still, I wasn't going back. Not this time. For a few days, I kept up appearances. I cooked, I cleaned, I wore the mask of the obedient wife because I knew he was watching me closely now. His silences were sharper, his eyes darting like a predator sensing danger. He didn't touch me, not even to feign affection, but the tension in the air was heavier than ever. Then one evening, while he was in the shower, I slipped into his study. My hands shook as I opened drawers, shuffled papers, searched through the mess he thought was organized. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, only that I needed to see the pieces of his double life with my own eyes. And there it was, credit card statements tucked carelessly under case files. Hotel charges. Jewelry stores. Restaurants we had never been to together. The proof wasn't just in my suspicions anymore. It was in ink and numbers. I snapped photos with my phone, my pulse racing. This wasn't just betrayal, it was ammunition. When I closed the drawer and slipped back out, Elias was waiting in the hallway. He didn't say a word, just raised an eyebrow. I showed him the photos, and his lips pressed into a tight line. You're building a case, he said. I'm building my freedom, I whispered. Daniel came down moments later, towel around his waist, hair damp. He looked at me with a grin that made my skin crawl. Order something for dinner. I don't feel like going out. I nodded, but my mind was already miles ahead, plotting. Over the next week, I let Elias guide me. He was patient, deliberate. He reminded me to move carefully, to think like Daniel thought, to anticipate his next step. At first it felt foreign, like playing a game I didn't know the rules to. But soon I realized I'd been playing his game all along. I just hadn't known it. Now, the difference was I wasn't playing to survive. I was playing to win. One afternoon, Elias took me to a quiet diner outside town. The kind of place where no one asked questions, where the hum of the jukebox and the clink of dishes filled the silence between words. "You have options," he said, sliding a coffee toward me. "You can walk away quietly. Take the evidence, file for divorce, expose him if you want." Or he paused, studying me. "Or you can make sure he feels everything he put you through." The thought lit something dark in me. Walking away had always been my instinct, the safer choice. But hadn't I already tried safety? Hadn't I swallowed my pride, silenced my voice, made myself small for the sake of peace? And what had that earned me? Rain-soaked sidewalks, empty beds, perfume on his shirts that wasn't mine. No. This time, I wouldn't just leave. I wanted him to feel it. What would that look like? I asked, my voice low. Elias leaned back, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "You hit him where it hurts. His pride, his image, his power. Men like him don't care about love. They care about control. Take that away, and he crumbles." I imagined it. Daniel, stripped of his arrogance, his reputation in ruins, forced to face the truth about himself. The image was intoxicating. "I want that," I said. Elias nodded once, like he'd been expecting it. "Then we plan." The first step was patience. Daniel was careless when he thought he was winning. He flaunted Samantha more openly now, disappearing for hours, sometimes whole nights, without explanation. Each absence gave me more space to gather proof. Emails on his laptop, receipts stuffed into his briefcase, even careless texts he left open on his phone. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. I wasn't just building a case for divorce anymore. I was building a weapon. But with every secret I uncovered, the danger grew. Daniel wasn't oblivious. He sensed the shift in me. One night, as we sat at the dinner table in silence, he slammed his fork down and glared at me. "You've been different," he said, eyes sharp. I forced a small smile. "Have I? Don't play games with me, Ava. You're hiding something." I held his gaze, my heart pounding. Maybe I'm just finally seeing clearly. His nostrils flared. For a moment, I thought he'd strike me right there across the table. But instead he stood abruptly, stormed upstairs, and left me with the sound of his footsteps pounding like warning drums. When I told Elias, his expression hardened. "He's unraveling. That's good for us, but dangerous for you. We need to accelerate." And we did. We opened a separate account in my name. I funneled small amounts of money from our joint account into it, enough to matter, but not enough for him to notice right away. Elias connected me with a lawyer, discreet but fierce, who assured me Daniel's infidelity and financial carelessness would destroy him in court. But I wanted more than legal victory. I wanted him to taste the same helplessness he'd forced on me. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Daniel had an important dinner scheduled with a potential client, a wealthy businessman whose endorsement could make or break his firm. He spent days rehearsing his charm, perfecting his pitch. He demanded I accompany him, dressing me like his trophy to prove his stability and success. I agreed. But behind the calm smile I wore, I was already planning how to burn it all down. On the night of the dinner, I slipped Elias a flash drive containing copies of Daniel's financial documents, hotel receipts, and damning emails. Elias made sure it found its way into the right hands, specifically the businessman Daniel was so desperate to impress. I'll never forget the moment it happened. We were seated at the restaurant, Daniel in his element, charming and smug. He poured wine, told jokes, leaned on me for show. Then the businessman's assistant entered, handed him a folder, and whispered in his ear. The man's expression shifted as he scanned the pages. His polite smile faded into a frown. He looked up at Daniel with cold eyes. "Is this true?" he asked, holding up the folder. Daniel's face drained of color. What is this? Where did you get that? The man tossed the papers onto the table. I don't do business with liars, or with men who can't keep their own lives in order. The room spun with silence. Every eye in the restaurant seemed to turn toward us. Daniel stammered, his voice breaking for the first time I could remember. And me? I sat there, calm and still, watching the cracks spread across his perfect facade. When we got home, he erupted. He threw his jacket across the room, his face red with rage. You did this, he shouted. You humiliated me. I didn't flinch. You humiliated yourself. He lunged toward me, but Elias stepped through the door at that exact moment. His presence was enough to halt Daniel in his tracks. Touch her, Elias said evenly, and you'll regret it. Daniel's chest heaved, his fists clenched, but he backed away. And that's when I knew the balance had shifted. The man who once left me trembling in the rain now stood powerless in his own home, his empire crumbling, his pride in shreds. And I wasn't done yet. After that night at the restaurant, Daniel's mask began to slip faster than I ever imagined. The man who once strutted through life with unshakable arrogance now paced the halls like a trapped animal. He barked at phone calls, slammed doors, snapped at anyone who dared cross his path. The loss of that client wasn't just a setback, it was a wound straight to his pride. And pride was the only thing he had left. I watched him unravel, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel fear. I felt power. The calls started first, partners questioning his decisions, colleagues distancing themselves, whispers of scandal trailing him like smoke. Word traveled fast in his world, and once doubt sank in, it spread like a disease. At night, when he thought I was asleep, I'd hear him muttering into his phone, begging for reassurance, promising to fix things. But the more he clawed, the deeper he sank. And still he blamed me. You've turned cold, he snarled one morning, slamming his coffee cup on the counter so hard it cracked. Ever since you had me followed, you've been poisoning this house. I looked at him evenly, refusing to flinch. You poisoned it the day you lied to me. The day you left me in the rain. His jaw tightened. He hated when I brought that night up. It punctured his narrative, reminded him of the truth he couldn't twist. You'll regret this, he said darkly, leaning close enough that I could see the bloodshot in his eyes. Everything you're doing, everything you think you're hiding, it will come back on you. But the threat rang hollow. He wasn't the man who left me helpless anymore. He was a man scrambling for control, and I wasn't giving it back. Elias sensed the shift too. He spent more time at the house now, under the guise of protection. Sometimes he stood guard by the door, silent and steady, his presence enough to keep Daniel from pushing too far. Other times, when Daniel stormed off to another late-night rendezvous with Samantha, Elias and I would sit in the living room, planning, refining, strengthening the net we were weaving. You've already cut him at the knees, Elias said one evening, his voice low as we shared a bottle of wine. But if you want to finish this, you need to cut off his head. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through me. What does that mean? It means you take away everything he hides behind, his reputation, his finances, his mistress. Leave him standing with nothing but himself. And trust me, that's the one thing he won't be able to face. The thought sent a thrill through me, darker than anything I'd ever felt. I wasn't just imagining escape anymore, I was imagining ruin. His ruin. So we began. The finances were easiest. I funneled more money into the private account, small enough to stay hidden, steady enough to build. Elias helped me set up safeguards, new locks, a safety deposit box, even a burner phone to keep our communication clear. Every step I took away from Daniel felt like a stone lifted from my chest. Then came Samantha. I'd never met her face to face, but I'd seen enough, texts dripping with false sweetness, photos carelessly left in his inbox. She thought she was winning, thought she was the prize. But I knew her type. Daniel wasn't her future. He was her stepping stone. Elias tracked her down easily. She wasn't discreet. When I finally saw her, walking out of Daniel's car one afternoon, laughing too loud, hair perfectly curled, I didn't feel jealousy. I felt pity. She was living a dream that would collapse the moment Daniel fell. And I was making sure he did. The final piece was his reputation. The evidence I had already gathered was strong, but Elias wanted more. One nail doesn't seal the coffin, he told me. We need the whole lid. So I dug deeper. I went through old files, emails, even storage boxes in the attic. I found inconsistencies in his tax returns, questionable payments to consultants, even correspondence that hinted at shady deals buried in legal jargon. Each discovery was a fresh dagger, and I collected them all, cataloged and organized, ready to be unleashed. But with every move I made, Daniel grew more volatile. One night, he came home drunk, his shirt half unbuttoned, lipstick smeared on his collar. He staggered into the kitchen where I sat waiting. "You think you're smart," he slurred, pointing a shaky finger at me. "But you're not. You're weak. Always have been." I looked at him calmly, my hands folded on the table. "Then why are you so afraid of me now?" His face twisted, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But Elias appeared in the doorway, silent, unyielding, and Daniel backed down, muttering curses as he stumbled upstairs. Later, Elias sat across from me, his gaze steady.
"He's close to snapping.
You need to decide how far you're willing to go." I stared into my glass, the reflection of my tired eyes staring back. "I don't just want to leave him," I whispered. "I want to erase him. I want him to know what it feels like to lose everything." And saying it out loud didn't scare me. It thrilled me. The opportunity came when Daniel received a summons for a disciplinary hearing. Word of his misconduct had reached the state bar. He tried to hide it, but I intercepted the letter before he could shred it. When he confronted me, his fury was volcanic. "You think you can destroy me?" he shouted, slamming the paper down on the counter. "I built this life. I made you." I stood tall, my voice steady.
"No."
"You broke me, but I'm still here. And you're the one falling apart." His hands shook with rage. For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick and dangerous. Then he spat on the floor at my feet and stormed out, the door slamming behind him so hard it rattled the walls. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt free. That night, Elias stayed close, his presence a shield. We sat together on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around us. He didn't push, didn't demand. He just sat there, quiet and steady, like the anchor I hadn't known I needed. "You're stronger than you think," he said finally. I looked at him, the moonlight softening his features. "I don't feel strong. I feel angry, furious. Like if I stop moving, I'll burn alive." He nodded slowly. "That's strength too. Fire doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it clears the way." I didn't answer, but something in his words settled deep inside me. The next morning, I went to the bank. I withdrew enough money to cover the next steps. The woman behind the counter smiled politely, unaware she was handing me the key to my escape, my revenge, my rebirth. When I came home, Daniel was waiting. His eyes were bloodshot, his suit wrinkled. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a desperate man clinging to scraps. "Where were you?" he demanded. I held his gaze. "Taking back what's mine." His face twisted. "Nothing is yours. Not the house, not the money, not even your name. Everything you have is because of me." For the first time, I laughed. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just laughed. Because his words sounded ridiculous now, the desperate cries of a man who knew the ground was crumbling beneath him. "Watch me prove you wrong," I said softly. And in that moment, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Real fear. It was the sweetest thing I had ever seen. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading the war. And Daniel, for all his threats and cruelty, was the one retreating. I didn't know how far it would go, how ugly it might get. But I knew one thing for certain. He had left me in the rain once, thinking it would teach me a lesson. Now it was my turn to teach him one. The morning of the hearing, I woke up before the sun. My body moved like it had been preparing for this day my entire life. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Daniel, though I knew he hadn't truly slept. His restless shifting had kept me up half the night. He was unraveling, pacing the floor, muttering curses under his breath. The man who once towered over me now looked like a shadow shrinking in the light. I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the simple black dress I had chosen. Nothing flashy, nothing designed to draw attention, just elegance.
Dignity.
Exactly what he had stripped from me and what I was taking back piece by piece. When I walked downstairs, Elias was waiting in the driveway. He leaned against his SUV, broad-shouldered and steady, a quiet sentinel. His eyes scanned me, then softened. "You're ready," he said. I nodded. More than ready. The drive to the courthouse was quiet. The city streets were just waking up, shops opening, buses rumbling by. But inside the car, the silence was heavy with anticipation. Elias didn't fill it with small talk. He knew I needed space to breathe, to steel myself. His presence was enough. When we arrived, Daniel was already there, pacing on the courthouse steps. His suit was pressed, his tie sharp, but his face betrayed him. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, sweat beading at his temples. He spotted me and froze. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I expected anger, maybe contempt. Instead, I saw something I never thought I'd see in him.
Fear.
"You don't belong here," he snapped as I approached. "Yes, I do," I said softly. "I belong everywhere you thought I'd never stand." Inside, the hearing room buzzed with quiet chatter. Lawyers shuffled papers, officials whispered, the air thick with judgment waiting to be passed. I took my seat, back straight, chin high. Daniel sat across from me, his eyes darting, his hands restless. When the panel entered, the room fell silent. The proceedings began, formal, methodical, each accusation laid out with precision.
Fraud.
Misconduct. Conflicts of interest. Every word was a nail in the coffin I had built. I watched Daniel squirm, deny, bluster. He leaned on his charm, his practiced confidence, but it cracked with every question. The evidence was too solid, too damning. And then came the final blow. Emails. Photos. Financial statements. The panel flipped through them, their frowns deepening. One by one, they saw the truth I had lived with for years. The lies, the deceit, the arrogance. Daniel's voice broke as he tried to defend himself. "This is taken out of context," he stammered. "I've given everything to this profession." "Enough," one of the officials said sharply. "The evidence speaks for itself." The gavel came down like thunder. His license was suspended pending further investigation. His career, his identity was gone. The room buzzed with whispers as Daniel slumped back in his chair, color draining from his face. For the first time, he looked small. Not the man who left me shivering in the rain, not the tyrant who barked orders and threats, but a broken figure crushed under the weight of his own choices. When the hearing adjourned, he staggered out, eyes wild. He caught sight of me in the hallway and lunged forward, his voice hoarse. "You did this," he shouted. "You ruined me." Elias stepped between us in an instant, his hand firm on Daniel's chest. "Back off." But I didn't flinch. I met Daniel's gaze, steady and calm.
"No, Daniel.
"You ruined yourself. I just stopped covering for you." The words hung in the air like a verdict more final than the one inside. He glared at me, chest heaving, but for once, he had no words left. He turned and stormed out, his footsteps echoing like the last desperate beats of a dying drum. That night, the house was silent. Daniel didn't come home. I didn't wait for him. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch, watching the stars. Elias joined me, his presence a quiet comfort. "It's done," I whispered. "Not yet," he said softly. "Men like him don't give up so easily. He'll come back. But when he does, you'll be ready." And he was right. The next day, Daniel returned. But he wasn't the same. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his hair disheveled. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. He stormed into the living room, his voice ragged. "Do you think you've won? You think destroying me makes you strong? You're nothing without me." I stood slowly, meeting his rage with calm. "That's where you're wrong. I'm everything without you. His hand twitched, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. But Elias stepped in from the doorway, his presence filling the room like a wall of steel. Daniel's face twisted. He looked from me to Elias, then back, realization dawning.
Him, he spat.
This was all him, wasn't it? No, I said firmly. This was me. Elias protected me, but I'm the one who ended you. His chest heaved, his fists clenched, but there was nothing left for him to fight with. No career, no reputation, no control, just the hollow shell of a man who thought he was untouchable. When he finally stormed out for the last time, slamming the door behind him, I felt the weight lift. Years of silence, of fear, of humiliation, gone with the echo of his footsteps fading into the night. And mine would end with him on his knees. For the first time in as long as I could remember, the house was mine. The days that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. I moved through the rooms slowly, reclaiming them piece by piece. The kitchen where he mocked me, the study where he kept secrets, the bedroom where I once cried myself to sleep. Each space felt different now, lighter, freer, mine. Elias stayed close, never hovering, never pressing, just steady. Some nights we sat in silence, others we talked for hours, unraveling the knots I had carried for so long. He never told me what to feel, never pushed me to move faster than I was ready. You did more than survive, he said one evening, his voice quiet but certain. You fought back. You took back your life. That's not just strength, Ava. That's power. I let the words sink in, their truth warming me from the inside. For years, I thought power belonged to people like Daniel, loud, arrogant, cruel. But now I understood. Power wasn't in control. It was in reclaiming yourself when someone tried to take it away. Weeks passed. Daniel's name was dragged through the papers, whispers of scandal turning into headlines. His firm cut ties. His so-called friends abandoned him. Samantha? She vanished as soon as the money and prestige dried up. He was alone, and I was free. One afternoon, I returned to the porch where it all began, the place I had once stood, drenched and shaking, waiting for a man who never came back for me. I stood there again, the sun warm on my skin, the breeze gentle against my face. This time, I wasn't waiting. I was moving forward. And as Elias joined me, standing by my side, I realized something. Revenge wasn't just about destroying him. It was about rebuilding me. He left me in the rain once, thinking he was teaching me a lesson. But the real lesson was this. I was never the weak one.
He was.
And now, he would spend the rest of his life learning what it felt like to be powerless, while I finally, fully was free. If you've been following Ava's journey and felt every twist, betrayal, and moment of triumph with her, don't just stop here. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts.